Good morning, chapel. As Chris already mentioned, my name is Rebekah, and of all of the things that you could know about me, this is the most important thing. This is the thing you must know about Rebekah. I love dogs, and more specifically, I love my dog. How many of you guys out there have dogs or love dogs or like dogs? Raise your hand, like super high. Okay, great. So it looks like the majority of you, so this will resonate with a lot of you. I'm glad. For you dog owners out there, raise your hand if you think your dog is the best dog. My hand is raised very high because I also believe this. I'm glad that you guys are honest, and what I have to tell you today is really important, especially for those of you who just raised your hand. You guys are all wrong, because my dog is actually the best dog, and I have photos to prove it. So this is Gracie. Isn't she cute? I know, right? She is an 11-year-old golden retriever. If you want to show the next picture, look at the way her paws like cross. She is the most adorable dog in the entire world. I kid you not. She is the best dog. For those of you who got offended by me saying that, I'm sorry. Like, at least we can all agree that dogs are better than cats, right? Yes, okay, thank you so much. You guys are a great audience. So this is what I want to talk to you guys about today. My dog Gracie has quite the personality. See, Gracie is very comfortable with my family. And so if I call my dog to her, her immediate response is typically to look at me with this face that says, I don't really want to. Or, I'm very comfortable here. And so I will call my dog from her very comfortable position that she's like laying in, looking cute like that. And she responds not in the way I would have hoped. Unless, of course, I am offering to take her on a walk or give her food or take her to the park, all things that she loves. See, unless I ask my dog to do something that she already wants to do, she's probably not going to do it, or she'll at least take a really long time to get to that point of saying yes. But despite the fact that my dog is incredibly disobedient and probably the most stubborn creature on the face of the earth I know besides myself, I will still take any minute that I can to brag about her to literally hundreds of people and tell everyone that she is the best dog. See, I will take care of her, and I will continue to love her. And as I was thinking about this, as I was thinking about the way that I interact with my dog, I realized something. My relationship with my dog is actually a lot like my relationship with God. And I would go so far as to guess that it's a lot like most of your relationships with God. Here's what I mean by this. Rebekah is a very stubborn person. So unless God is calling me to do something that I already want to do, like starting that specific internship or pursuing that specific relationship or reaching out to that very specific person who I know needs a friend, unless it's something that's already in my plan, I'm not going to probably want to answer God and respond to him. I'm probably going to look at him from my very comfortable position and say, do I have to, God? Are you sure? Like, I don't really want to. I'm comfortable here. And the thing about that is even when I am disobedient to God, even when I'm not a perfect Christian or a perfect follower of Jesus, God still takes care of me. God is still faithful to me and to all of you. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, is the importance of trusting God's faithfulness. Faithfulness can be this word that we kind of throw around a lot. We kind of know what it means, but we don't really. So this is what faithfulness is. Faithfulness is someone or something that can be relied on, is unchanging, and is worthy of our trust. It means steadfast and steady and loyal and devoted and present. And Scripture tells us that God is all of those things to us, to me and to you. And we need that. We need to be reminded of his faithfulness, of his constant presence and unconditional devotion, because we have seasons in life where we forget or we don't feel that from God or anyone else. I have spent weeks at a time of my life feeling isolated and blocked off from my community, doubting that they actually care for me and that they actually want to be there for me. And I have had panic attacks stemming from the idea that I'm not worth unconditional love, that I'm not worth someone sticking around. Because it's really easy for me to associate my own feelings about myself with how God views me. And so to know that God is faithful, that God is steadfast and worthy of my trust, is a reminder that I need, and I think we all need all the time, because I don't think I'm the only person who forgets it so easily. So here are the questions that I want to ask you today. In light of the fact that God is faithful, we know he is faithful. Why is God faithful? Why is he devoted to us? And why does he take care of us? And how? What does this look like? How do we see God's faithfulness in our everyday lives? I'm going to be looking at Psalm 86 for some answers. This psalm was written as a lament, meaning that David, the author, was essentially complaining to God about how sucky his life was. He was saying, God, I'm facing all of these really difficult challenges, these really horrible circumstances, but in the middle of that, he chooses to be in conversation with God because he believes that God will be faithful to do something about it. He has faith in God's faithfulness. So I want to read Psalm 86, 1 through 7. You guys are welcome to follow along behind the screen if you want. It says this, David says, "Incline your ear, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am godly. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for to you do I cry all the day. Gladden the soul of your servant, for to you, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. For you, O Lord, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call upon you. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Listen to my plea for grace. In the day of my trouble, I call upon you, for you answer me." This is the word of the Lord. So, according to this portion of this psalm, why is God faithful? Why is he worthy of our trust? Why is he reliable? Well, you see, one of the answers is simply because he can. In verse 5, which is about halfway down the screen, David says that God is abounding in steadfast love, or another translation says full of unfailing love. This means that God chooses to stay devoted to us, chooses to be faithful out of love, because he's literally overflowing with it. Now, unlike us, who can be very much filled with love one second and very empty of it the next, God doesn't have that problem. God never runs out of anything to give, including his presence and devotion and love for us. And so we know that God is constant, is steadfast, is always full of love and always worthy of our trust, because he has the capacity to be those things. He can live up to that standard when nobody else can. I don't know about you guys, but even as much as I love even my closest and dearest friends, there is literally no way in which I am able to always be fully present with them, always able to perfectly listen to everything they say, and even able to perfectly love them. I am a finite human being. I'm limited. But God has the capacity to stay constant with us without needing to take a break to recharge his batteries. And I hope the knowledge of that is encouraging to you, because if you have friends and family and significant others and loved ones who you trust to be devoted to you, who you trust to love you no matter what you say or no matter what you do, and they are limited human beings, how much greater can a God who isn't limited be all of those things for us? So why is God faithful? Well, the first reason that God is faithful is because he can be. he has the capacity to be unfailingly present with us at all times. Another reason why God is faithful in light of Psalm 86 is because we ask him to be. The second half of verse 5, David says, God is full of unfailing love to all who ask, or this says to all who call upon him. He is responding to our ask. See, David is asking for help. He isn't just telling God about the challenges he's facing. He's actually asking for a response and for an answer. And this is what God does when we ask him to do something. He listens to us. Before we even talk about how God responds, which I will talk about, we need to take a second to think about the fact that God actually listens to us in the first place. Because we all know what it feels like not to be listened to. Have you guys ever been in that situation in a group where you start talking and as soon as you open your mouth, everybody turns and has their own conversation, leaving you out, and then you're left kind of just sharing your really important life update or telling that really funny story that you couldn't wait to tell to the void. And so the only option you really have is to just kind of trail off and stop talking. And then as soon as that happens, of course, everybody somehow includes you back into the conversation. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But I have definitely felt what it feels like to not be heard. We know it doesn't make us feel good. It makes us feel invisible and unvalued and neglected and unimportant. And that's why we need to take time to recognize that God is listening to us in the first place. He's actively listening. The first thing that David says in this psalm actually is, incline your ear, O Lord. He's literally saying, God, please listen, do this, incline your ear. And after asking God to do that, he trusts that the rest of what he says will be heard. He asks God to listen and then asks God to respond. And I think that's really cool that we as followers of Jesus have this opportunity to share our hearts and thoughts with him, and that he is faithful to listen to it all. God doesn't space out on you when you're talking to him, and he doesn't get distracted on his phone when you're being really vulnerable with him. He is fully present, and he listens faithfully, and then he responds. So why is God faithful? God is faithful because he has the capacity to be, and because we ask him to be. Because he has the capacity to be, and because we ask him to be. I want to talk about one more reason why God is faithful, and this has to do with action on our part. David says something a lot throughout his conversation with God that I think we tend to miss out or intentionally ignore because it makes us uncomfortable. It adds this idea of exclusivity to the mix. David uses phrases throughout his prayer like, I am godly and I am devoted to you, and you are my God, and I lift up my soul to you. This is to say that David believes God is present with him because he has already chosen to follow God. He has already chosen to have a relationship with God. David isn't saying, hey, God, I don't really know if I trust you or if I believe in you or if I even want to follow you, but get back to me soon because I really want all of the benefits of this relationship without any of the commitment. Yeah, that's what David is totally saying, right? No, we see that David is already devoted to God, and he's actually using that as a valid reason as to why God should listen and respond to him in the first place. Now, I want to be careful here that I'm not conveying to you the idea that you have to be a good enough Christian or you have to do X, Y, Z amount of things in order to be loved. No, because this has everything to do with our heart and nothing to do with our actions. God is present with us, he listens to us, and he answers us because he already has a relationship with us. If you're a parent and you're walking around in the grocery store or in the park where parents hang out, I don't know, and this random kid walks up to you and starts saying, hi, Mom, how are you doing? Like, I fell on the playground and scraped my elbow. Can I have a Band-Aid? Or like, hi, Dad, school was really horrible today, and I'm just really bummed out. Can we go home? I want new sheets for my bed also. What would your initial response be to that? You probably wouldn't say, okay, random child, yes, I totally know who you are. Your first question would hopefully be, whose child are you? And where are your parents? This is not your child. You don't just take random kids off the street home with you. They're not puppies or kittens. But we see in this psalm that David is using his relationship with God as a reason as to why God is faithful, because God is already his father. God is already his father. So why is God faithful? Because we have a relationship with him. Why is God faithful? Because he has the capacity to be, because we ask him to be faithful, and because we have a relationship with him. Now, the second question I want to ask is, how is God faithful? I think it's really easy for us to have a disconnect between knowing, yeah, God is faithful, and actually seeing what that looks like in our own lives and our own stories. Well, one of the ways, according to the psalm, that God is faithful is through giving us daily strength to face our challenges. I don't have it up here, but in verse 16 of Psalm 86, David says this to God. He says, "Turn to me and be gracious to me. Give your strength to your servant." Give your strength to your servant. There have been so many times in my own life where I have not been strong enough to move forward on my own. And the only reason why I could was because of God. About this time last year, I was going through a devastating breakup that just left me completely horribly sad all the time. And the first couple days immediately following, I would sit on my bed and I would cry, and I would cry some more, and I would cry until I didn't have any tears left to cry. And then I would sit in my bed, kind of staring off into the space, feeling empty. And then I would go to bed and sleep restlessly, but also at the same time wish that I didn't actually wake up in the morning. It was that bad. I was completely devastated. And that is one of the times in my life where I felt the least strong. I did not feel strong enough to face a day during those times. But the fact that I was even able to wake up in the morning, the fact that I was able to walk around and eventually and slowly heal from that, is proof of God's faithfulness in my life, of giving me strength to get through that really challenging experience. I did not have the strength to move on. And if I didn't have the strength to move on, I moved on. Where did that strength come from? I can tell you with 100% certainty that that strength came from God. It was God. God was so faithful to stay present with me and hold me and keep me and give me the strength I needed to literally face my day. And whether or not you are going through a really challenging time or not today, the fact that you're even here, awake and awake enough to choose to be here of all places, shows that God gave you strength to get up and to face the day. God's faithfulness in giving us strength can look like a lot of different things. Maybe it looks like standing up to something that you know isn't right, that you know isn't just. Maybe it looks like biting your tongue when you want to see that really snappy comeback to that really annoying classmate or friend. Maybe it looks like forgiving somebody who hurt you. And maybe it looks like pushing into those feelings and emotions of grief and pain instead of ignoring them. But regardless of how it manifests in God giving us strength, he is still giving us strength and showing his faithfulness and reliability to us through that. God shows his faithfulness, his trustworthiness, his presence to us through giving us strength. How is God faithful? He gives us strength. The other way that we see God's faithfulness, his reliability, the how, is through his protection. In verse 2, David cries out, asking God to save him. Another translation uses the word protect. If someone is saving or protecting you, That means that they have your best interest at heart. And a phenomenal example of this, of Jesus being faithful through saving us, is through Jesus. That is a whole sermon in of itself. I don't have time to talk about that today, but I do have time to talk more about my dog, so I am. My dog loves going outside. Gracie is an outside dog with people issues. She loves people. And so most of the time, if I see her wanting to go outside and play in the snow or the grass, I will let her because I know she likes it. I know she enjoys playing in the snow or the grass, and I want to see her happy. But if the day comes where I see a skunk on the other side of that door, do you want to know what I'm not going to do? I am not going to open that door because I know what will happen if I open that door. My dog will lose that fight with the skunk. It wouldn't even be a fight. She would walk up to the skunk and say, "Hello, how are you today?" And the skunk would spray her. And then my dog would be so unhappy because she just got sprayed with a skunk, so now she smells bad and her pride is a little injured. And now she needs a bath to clean that smell off, which is arguably my dog's least favorite thing after listening to what I have to say to her. And so even though in my dog's mind, she's thinking my idiot human doesn't actually care for me, she's not being faithful for me, she doesn't have my best interest at heart, let me tell you, this idiot human sees something that my dog doesn't see and knows to protect her from that. And in our minds, maybe it feels like God is being the opposite of faithful or reliable or worth our trust because maybe it feels like he's closing doors and not letting us go where we want to go. But also, maybe, just maybe because God is God and we are us, God's protection, his saving, isn't something that we always understand or comprehend. And so maybe part of the reason why he is reliable and how he is reliable is because he sees things that we don't and is faithful to protect us from them and save us from them. I will never forget something that a speaker in chapel around this time last year said. It was as I was going through this really devastating experience, and I was trying to make sense of the pain. God, how do I see you being faithful in this? All I feel is this grief and sorrow. How is this from you? And the speaker said something that I will never forget. This is what he said. When it rains in our lives, God doesn't always tell us why it's raining, but he does give us an umbrella to keep us dry. When it rains in our lives, God doesn't always tell us why it's raining, but he does give us an umbrella to keep us dry. The way that God is faithful sometimes extends past our own ability to understand, but that doesn't mean he isn't being that or caring for us in what he does. And that requires faith on our part to believe, because we may not always see it, but that doesn't mean it isn't true. Now, I know I said I had 2 questions to ask you guys. I lied. I actually have a third one. In light of the fact that God is faithful, knowing why he's faithful, and knowing how he's faithful, what should our response be? What do we do when we feel like God isn't worth being trusted? And what do we do when we do feel like God is listening to us and is devoted to us and is answering us? It can be really easy for us to have this mindset that says, I will do something in response when I see it. But based off of what David writes, that is actually the opposite of what we should do. David says something really interesting in the middle of his psalm. So I'm going to read verses 8 through 12 if you guys want to follow along on the screen behind me. David says this, "There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. All the nations you have made shall come and worship before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name. For you are great and do wondrous things. You alone are God. Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. I give thanks to you, O Lord my God, with my whole heart, and I will glorify your name forever. Guys, God hasn't even acted yet, but David already has faith that God is going to because he trusts God and believes that he will be reliable. David is stepping out in faith before seeing God act. He takes a break from asking God to do something for him to thank him in advance. He asks for God to teach him his way, for God to change his heart, and he gives thanks to God. And that's not something we usually think about, but I think it is one of the most important things for us to do. This should be our response to God's faithfulness, both when we believe it and when we don't. Have faith that God will be faithful. Trust that he is trustworthy. Believe that he is worth believing. Choose to believe that God is reliable and live a life that shows that choice too. David is asking God, even in the middle of his own doubt and confusion and storm, to shift his own perspective. He asks God to change his heart towards God. And that's what we should be doing, guys. But especially when we're not sure how we see God being faithful or constant in our lives. Instead of having a mindset that says, I don't see how God is being faithful, so he must not be faithful, maybe instead we should ask God to change our perspective, asking God, help us to see the ways in which you have already been faithful in our lives and in our stories. Our response to God's faithfulness when we don't feel it and when we do feel it should be to worship him and to trust him. So I want to ask you guys a few questions before we close. What does this actually look like for your life? What does this actually mean? First, I invite you to ask yourself this question. How have you seen God be faithful to you in your own life? How have you seen that faithfulness in your life this year, or maybe this month, or this week, or even today? How have you seen God be faithful in your own story? And second, I invite you to ask this with me. I invite you to examine what your response has been to God, both when you feel his presence and trust that he is trustworthy, and when you don't. Both when you believe that he is close to you and when you don't feel it. This is my challenge for all of you and for myself every day of my life. Regardless of your current circumstance, choose to actively look for both the big ways and the little ways in which God has been faithful, and choose to thank him for it. Choose to look for both the big ways and the little ways in which God has been faithful, and choose to thank him for it. Continue being faithful and diligent, and trust that God is listening. Let me pray, and you will all be dismissed. God, there is no one like you, and no works like yours. You are great and do wonderful things, and you alone are God. Teach us all your way so that we can walk in your truth, and help our hearts to hold you in awe. God, we give you thanks with our whole hearts, and we will worship and praise your name forever. Thank you for your faithfulness. Amen. You guys are dismissed. Amen.